Welcome. Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. We are recapping what was a very entertaining game. I don't know that we wanted an entertaining game, but we got one. Iowa 24, Colorado State 14. We are here to take your calls, talk about your observations in this game, and certainly Coach Don Patterson will be with us soon. Lots to uncover. This game was I didn't feel good at halftime. I mean, I don't know anybody that did because, and we're going to talk about this, Iowa's inability to run the football. It looked like it was going to be the deciding factor in this game. Iowa overcame a day where they could not run the football against a Mountain West opponent. But they found a way to win. And we will talk all about this victory. And of course, again, former Iowa coach Don Patterson will be with us shortly. Again, you're listening to Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. If you want to call us 860-499-3332, 860-499-3332. James Hemmer, bro, Petrus so bad. I would love to have a debate on this subject because Petrus threw the ball pretty accurately. I'm not saying his decision-making is good. He threw just a terrible interception on the bubble screen. I mean, just terrible decision-making there. He still takes sacks at bad times, but he threw some really nice balls today, James. All right? I'm not saying he's the next Heisman favorite at Iowa, but he threw some nice passes today. All right. We're going to talk about that, but I want to pump the brakes on the Petrus is so bad talks because, and I want to talk about this later, but there was a friend of mine that called, or excuse me, texted during the game and said Petrus needs to be benched. And I was honestly, at the time, I was sort of unsure. I really did feel like that play could end up obviously coming back to bite Iowa. The interception that was returned and ended up being a touchdown, 14-7 at halftime. Colorado State went up, and Iowa overcame it. And had Iowa benched Spencer, Iowa would not have won this game because the throws that Spencer made were a big part of why they won. Now, the defense was spectacular. We know that. And, of course, we'll talk about the defense. But overall, a win's a win. A win's a win. I know that's only going to go so far. At some point, they're going to have to throw the football consistently better. I mean, let's look at his stats. He's 15-23 for 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 INT. You want the INT back. There's no question he wants that throw back. But if you throw out the interception, and I know you can't do that, those are good numbers. Those are good numbers. Like it or not, those are good numbers, all right? To me, the bigger concern right now is this running attack. It's just the biggest concern. And I know we talked with Kevin Lytle of the Coloradoan earlier this week, and he had said that he thought the strength of this Rams team was the run defense. The problem, though, with saying it's the strength of this team, the run, that's fine. That's all fine and dandy. But you're a Big Ten offense. You're supposed to pride yourself on running the football effectively, controlling the line of scrimmage, and they couldn't do it against a Mountain West team. That's a concern to me. Petrus is getting better. Petrus got better today. Okay, Petrus got better today. I'm not saying he's there, but I believe Petrus got better. James says he is inconsistent. He threw it good, yeah, but they were wide open. I just think he needs to make better decisions and learn when to throw the ball away and run it sometimes. Absolutely agree with you on that, James. Absolutely agree. Okay. This question, one more thing. Do you think no other quarterback on the roster could hit guys that were wide open? Let's remember Nate Stanley consistently missed open players down the field. Stanley was good locating an open guy, but he consistently overthrew deep routes. If you overthrow your deep guy, it's the worst thing you can do. Don Patterson will say that. I've said it. You'd rather underthrow than overthrow. And Spencer's throwing an accurate ball down the field. So, no, I don't think it's a given that Alex Padilla or Deuce Hogan would be able to hit on these deep routes. I don't. Because we've seen Iowa quarterbacks miss. And you can't miss on those. Now, Spencer did miss one. Sam Laporta had what looked like a touchdown. I believe it was third quarter. That Spencer overthrew. It was a bad throw. He also had a bad throw that went, he just fired this ball above Laporta, I believe, second quarter. That would have been about a 10-yard gain. That was a bad throw. I'm not saying Spencer is perfect as far as accuracy, but he is throwing a pretty accurate ball, I'd say 75% of the time. All right. Now, his decision-making is still not good at times, but it was better today. I have to say it was better today. The INT sucked, man. And those are the plays. You look at the Big Ten schedule. You got teams like Wisconsin and Penn State. Yeah, those are going to come back to bite you at some point. He cannot throw a bubble screen into double coverage. That's just ridiculous. This we can agree on. Offensive line did not look good. I agree with you on that. Now, I noticed a tweet during the game, and I didn't listen to the radio broadcast, but Ed Poe, and let me just say this right now. I am no defensive expert. Okay. I am no defensive expert at all. What I do know is that Ed Podolak reportedly, let me get my mic straight, talked about this during the game, that Colorado State was running a different defensive front, different look on the defensive front than Iowa was expecting. So it took about a half, and you could see in the second half, Iowa basically dominated. They allowed 0 points. They dominated Colorado State. Iowa's defense did in the second half. Okay. But the offensive line, I don't know. I just don't. I don't know. I don't know what to say about the offensive line. I noticed Kyler Schott did not start. He was playing late, so I'm assuming he's just still kind of getting back into game shape. I'm surprised that he didn't start. I don't know. I think probably starting, especially on the line, is probably overrated because Iowa seems to filter enough guys in anyways. But that was kind of odd, at least early. I think Connor Colby started, if I recall, and Nick DeYoung on the outside. But the O-line did not look good. I agree. Joseph Walters, O-line is terrible right now. It has to get fixed. The run game improve, or we are in trouble. Listen, this ain't about Tyler Goodson. I think we know that. And it's not about Ivory Kelly Martin. I know he's fumbled the ball like 3 or 4 times this year. It ain't about either of those guys. It's about the guys up front. And you don't want to point fingers because these guys are a unit, and I'm sure they're not pointing fingers. If they are, we got bigger problems. I don't think they are. But the offensive line it didn't look good. I don't know how big of an improvement they can make. I think back to 2019. I always bring this up. I'm sure our listeners get tired of me talking about it. But the interior of the line play in back in 2019 was so atrocious. And it never got better. It didn't get better. Iowa that was honestly 2019 was a year I thought Iowa had a chance to win the West. I really did. Now, I didn't think that preseason, but several games in, I thought Iowa had the pieces, especially with Smith and Smith-Marset offensively. The defense was a typical Phil Parker defense. Christian Welch was a linebacker. Jaimin Colbert was playing well. I thought they were a good team, but the interior of the line play killed them, and it was guard play. It wasn't Linderbaum. So, yeah, I don't know. The tackles aren't playing great. Again, I'm no guru on the offensive line, and I want to make this clear. I don't try to claim myself as an expert in anything as far as play calling or alignments. I am, for anybody who doesn't know my background, I'm a radio guy by trade, and I'm a talking head. I'll admit that. I'm a talking head. People accuse me all the time, oh, you're not an expert, you just got a mic. That's true. That's very true. But I think I'm somewhat knowledgeable as it relates to Iowa football, and I'm semi-knowledgeable as it relates to football in general. So hopefully people enjoy our program nonetheless. The expert is Don Patterson. And remember, Don will be coming up in a little bit. He's making his way back to his home right now so that he can join us to talk about this win. So stay tuned. Again, if you want to call us now, you call us now. You can call us later. You can call us both times. I don't care. 860-499-3332. Let's get to a couple of comments here. Our line is open. Event Tide agrees with James. He says they referred to these last two games as tune-up games. I think these last two games painfully pointed out the weak points of Iowa for other teams to target. Hope we can clean it up. There was improvement that was made, though. There was improvement that was made. Now, I said it last week. I thought Iowa made a huge jump in the run game last week because I thought Kent State's defense was actually decent and Iowa ran the ball well. They took a big step back today. Now, the passing game looked a lot better today. Iowa was able to get, and they found a guy who can actually blow the top off a defense in Keegan Johnson. Okay. So there's that. James goes on to say a lot of holds were missed in the first half. Yeah, I don't know. I honestly thought the officiating was worse against Kent State. I will say there were a couple calls today that I thought were terrible. I thought the first down they awarded to McBride, the CSU tight end, was a terrible call. It was to me, it was clearly out of bounds as he stretched the ball over the first down marker. There was another play. I've got it noted here. Yeah, the safety. I thought that could have been a safety. Remember, the ball's got to be completely out of the end zone, and it looked to me like Iowa got him in the end zone. And it was never even reviewed. They didn't call it a safety in the field. They never even reviewed it. Now, again, I know all these plays are supposed to be looked at in the booth, but to me, I don't know how you don't whistle down and get that play stopped to review it. But that was, to me, a poor call. There were a couple holds that were missed. Again, I've seen worse holds as far as no calls. I think Iowa State was a pretty bad game as far as holding calls, if I recall. Charles says defense could have had a couple more picks. They had 3 chances at least. One play on a deflection. I believe it was John Wagner that got his hand up late in the game. Justin Jacobs nearly had that one. Early in the game, Jack Kerner had one off of a deflection that was literally in his hands, and he just dropped it. Trying to think there. I think there was another play. Well, Y.A. Black had one late. Y.A. Black deflected one up in the air and then dove for it, but it was 4th down, so it would have actually been worse had he caught that because it would have hurt them field position-wise. But they did. They had 3 or probably 4 potential interceptions that just fell to the ground. Iowa, this defensive line, let me say something about this defensive line. They get their hands up on every play, and that's really, really good. And this line is getting in the backfield consistently. Now, CSU quarterback caused Iowa some issues today. Centeo, right? The CSU quarterback. He caused Iowa some issues. His ability to scramble, and I didn't expect that. Of course, I'm not a Colorado State expert, but I expected that more weeks 1 and 2 because you have Penix, who's we thought was mobile, and Brock Purdy, who we think of as mobile. Iowa contained both those guys, and they were not able to contain Centeo today in the first half. Joseph Walters asks, if you had to pick the remaining games now after the first 4, how would you pick them? Well, it's hard for me to evaluate based on the fact that we just got done watching Iowa struggle to beat a Mountain West team. But I also remember that Iowa did beat an Iowa State team on the road by 10 just a couple of weeks ago. And if anybody has missed this, I want to make sure we get the Iowa State score. They lost. Iowa State lost. That's not good. That's not good for Iowa's strength of schedule. You've got Indiana now with 2 losses and Iowa State with 2 losses. Obviously, Iowa just got to win. I mean, you just got to win. You can't worry about what other teams do. But for Iowa State to lose to Baylor today, that is not good at all. Back to the question here. I don't know. I picked Maryland to beat Iowa preseason, and I'm sticking with that. I think Iowa finds, I'm not, obviously I don't want that to happen. I think there's sometimes a confusion people think that because I picked Iowa to lose to Iowa State that I'm a hater, or that I picked Iowa to lose to Maryland, I'm a hater. That's got nothing to do with anything. I picked Iowa to lose to Maryland. I'll stick with that. I did pick Iowa to lose to Northwestern. I would flip that now based on what we've seen from Northwestern. I think Iowa wins that game, but I have a hard. I'll say this: I'm not going to remake my picks at this point, but I'll say this: I have a hard time seeing Iowa beating both Penn State and Wisconsin. I just do, based on what we've seen. I hope the run game can get going. I don't have much faith it can, because if it didn't get going against Colorado State, if this is going to be a top 5 run offense, which by the way it was last year, there's also this misconception that Iowa is never good in the running attack, and rarely they are. They actually have had very few years under Kirk Ferentz where they've been top 5 in the Big Ten in rushing attack as far as rush yards per attempt or per carry. But last year Iowa was, I think, 4.6 yards a carry on the season. They ranked number 5 in the Big Ten. So there are years where Iowa runs the ball effectively, and last year was one of those years. That's why this wasn't a huge concern of mine. I really thought Iowa would find a way to replace Alaric Jackson, to replace Mark Kallenberger, to replace Coy Cronk. Honestly, Coy Cronk didn't play much last year. Kallenberger was good, but I thought Jack Plum played well late in the season. Jack Plum's not even playing right now. Mason Richmond and Nick DeYoung seem to be, they have become every down guys. So, that tells me that they're clearly ahead of Jack Plum, who's a more experienced tackle. But to me, neither guy looks great at this point. The good news is the difference, if you compare the struggles from 2019 on the interior and the struggles Iowa's having now, you have an All-American center that is going to anchor that line all season in Tyler Linderbaum. All right. And in 2019, you had 2 fifth-year seniors playing the majority of snaps at guard in Levi and Landon Paulson. So the way I look at it is neither of those guys are going to get a whole lot better mid-season of their 5th and final season. They haven't made the improvement to that point. They probably aren't going to make it. The good news about these guys Iowa's got playing now, Colby's a freshman. Richmond's a freshman. DeYoung's a freshman. That is a good thing, okay? Growing pains early can certainly end up, and maybe it's not this year, maybe it's a year down the road, but I could see all 3 of those guys really taking a step. And you've got senior leadership from Schott. Theoretically, he can stay healthy and continue to play more snaps. That's a good thing. James reminds us, win is a win. Absolutely. Ryan Brock says, YA about got one. Another good observation here. I agree. Zach Van Valkenburg looked tremendous. I thought of him more as a pass rusher heading into the season. In fact, losing Chauncey Golston, who was a really good run stopper on the edge for Iowa, worried me heading into the season, because who did Iowa have returning at defensive end that you trust to stop the run and set the edge? Joe Evans is a hybrid pass rusher. I kind of thought of Van Valkenburg as a pass rusher. You get John Wagner, but he had dealt with injuries, and is he a tackle? Is he an end? But Van Valkenburg has turned into a very good run stopper as well as a pass rusher. Man, Evans and Van Valkenburg have been tremendous this year. They really have. Van Valkenburg does look like an NFL player. I don't know physically. I think he's big enough. Boy, the play today, and I'm trying to think of when it was, might have been third quarter. It seemed like most of Iowa's positive plays happened in the third quarter. But I believe it was an option keep for Santeo, and Van Valkenburg read it beautifully and got the sack on Santeo. And impressive stuff from Zach again today. Joseph Walters, first 2 wins don't look as good anymore. I would not call Wisconsin a dumpster fire. Okay, they've lost to a good Penn State team. It was a tight game. And they got, I don't want to say they got blown away, because that game today against Notre Dame was close until the very end, and Notre Dame kind of pulled away. Graham Mertz doesn't look good, but I would not say, there's people calling Iowa a dumpster fire right now. They're not, but I'm saying people nationally are looking at Iowa and saying you barely beat Colorado State and you got lucky against Kent State. You can see it both ways. I'm not saying you're doing this, Joseph, but to pencil in a win against Wisconsin right now would be, let's not do that. Hawkeye Howard says, I'm worried, very worried. I'm worried too. we kind of use the first half of our post-game shows as sort of a way to vent, and then Don Patterson kind of comes in and helps us actually check back into reality. So hopefully Don will help us to do that today because, I'm concerned. I came into this game concerned about the passing game, probably a little bit more than the run game because we saw better stuff again from the rushing attack last week. But I leave this game being more concerned about the rushing attack, which honestly I would rather be concerned moving forward about the rushing about the. Let me rephrase that. I would rather be concerned about the passing attack moving forward because to me, Iowa is predicated on a solid run game. If you can run the football, it opens up play action. And so it starts with the running attack. Even though Iowa typically doesn't have a great rushing attack contrary to what people think, Iowa doesn't usually have a great rushing attack as far as yards per attempt. And right now, I think Iowa ended up with like 2.2 yards a carry. Now, in college, sacks are counted against rushing average, which I don't believe I don't know why stats are counted that way in college, but the run game does not look good right now. So Ray Zirkelbach, I'm assuming this is a reference to Brian Ferentz. I didn't think Brian Ferentz called a terrible game. There were a few head-scratching calls again. I don't get running on 3rd and 11 at your own 10. I don't understand that. I guess you're just content with punting. I don't know. I don't want to go the nepotism route, but there were some head-scratching calls today. But there were some really good calls. The reverse, I don't know if you call it a Statue of Liberty, but it was almost the Statue of Liberty. It was a fake to Monty Pottebaum, I think at the 6, and then a fake throw for Petras and a handoff to Tracy on the reverse. That was an excellent call, and it was executed. And I will say this, Iowa found a way to score points because they threw the ball downfield. So credit to Brian Ferentz, who I don't think has had trust in Spencer to throw the ball downfield. He called a lot of pass plays for Spencer today, and aggressive pass plays. We're not talking checkdowns. And I say, again, I understand that typically a checkdown is not called, but the route trees, if you look last week against Kent State, were short, simple, and that's why Spencer completed a lot of balls for 4 or 5 yards. Today, they opened things up a bit. Keegan Johnson got going. We saw a little bit from Nico Reganey. Sam Laporta looked good. Tracy still, I would love to get the kid more touches because to me, he's the best receiver on the field right now. But and they tried to in the bubble screen. Spencer should have never thrown it, and it ended up being the interception. Okay, let me address this. Colorado State stacked to take the runaway. I see teams stack the box against Wisconsin every single year. And what does Wisconsin do? They run it best in the conference every single year. Without elite quarterbacks to open things up. They've had one elite quarterback. That's Russell Wilson. They've had the likes of Jack Cohn, who looks pretty good now, but was not very good at Wisconsin. Graham Mertz has not been good. You've got guys like Scott Tolzien. He was okay. They have not consistently had great quarterback play, and yet they've been able to run the football effectively. Iowa consistently sends offensive line players from all across the line on the interior, on the outsides, to the NFL year after year, and yet they consistently can't run the ball year after year. So I don't buy that it's CSU stacked to take away the run. I guarantee you that in a typical year, I'm not saying every year, but in a typical year, this is by the way, it's a good Colorado State team. It's a better team than their 1-3 record. There's no question about that. But in a typical year, Wisconsin would not have had any issues running for over 100 yards against Colorado State. I mean, you can argue, I know that's a what-if game, but you've got to be able to run the ball well against any Mountain West team if you're a Big Ten contending Iowa squad. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So I don't buy the fact, Charles, that they stack to take away the run, and that explains Iowa's struggles. Everybody's going to stack to take away the run. And now Iowa did take advantage of the passing attack today, so hopefully that will show a little something, and teams will back off a bit to cover the deep ball. But you've got to be able to throw the ball downfield and run the football. Charles says they did a good job. I think he's referring to Colorado State. Yeah, they did. Their run defense looked good. And that is something that Kevin Lytle of the Coloradoans said heading into this game, that he thought the best unit for Colorado State was the run defense. But again, it's a Mountain West team who just came off losses to South Dakota State and Vanderbilt. So, I don't know. Good to see you here, the real Hayden. He says it's the weirdest 4-0. Yeah, I could agree with that. But 4-0 is 4-0. And let's remember, let me pull this up, all right? I know that you can look, point to differences. Quarterback play is a big difference. Iowa's ability to run the football is a big difference. But look back at 2009. Look back at 2009. A Orange Bowl winning year might have been a national, Iowa had a good chance at the BCS championship game that year. As far as, you beat Ohio State. Iowa was up double digits against Northwestern late in the year. Stanzi goes down. They end up losing to Ohio State with James Vandenberg. Theoretically, if you win both those games, they're probably not only going to the Rose Bowl, they may be going to the BCS national championship game. But if you look early in 2009, you block 2 field goals in the final seconds against Northern Iowa. Win by 1. You beat Iowa State in a blowout, but this is like the Austin Arnaud years. They were terrible. Arizona was okay. I think that was a Nick Foles year. So they were a decent team. Iowa won by 10. But remember, they win at Penn State. Then they squeak by Arkansas State at home, 24-21. That Arkansas State game was scary. If anybody remembers that game back in 2009. So Northern Iowa, Arkansas State, you expect those to be the 2 easiest games on the schedule. And if you look at Iowa's wins, those games were closer than like 80% of the rest of the schedule was. So you can't read too much into these games that Iowa you would think would take care of business in more impressive fashion. Let's remember, Iowa did beat Kent State by 23 and they beat Colorado State by 10. I know it wasn't not pretty. I'm not saying it was, but not everything's bad. 4-0 is still 4-0. Yeah, I don't think this is the right time to be having an offensive coordinator debate. He's the coordinator. If you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. But, they're 4-0. And, to me, we're going to have this debate. Let's have it at the end of the season or beginning of the season. You're not making a change, so why do we need to talk about it? The real Hayden says, weirdest looking 4-0 team in the country. Yes, it was. It is. Joseph Walters. T. Good should be a lot better. I'm hoping it's still play calling. Well, it's not all play calling. The stretch plays on 2nd and 10, I don't understand. I would love to see the numbers, and I'd have to go back through and break it down. But I would love to see Iowa's yards per carry on outside zone runs. I don't remember Iowa having maybe one successful outside zone run, and it was one where T. Good just, as far as breakaway speed, looked great. It was early on, I think it was in the first quarter, and he broke it for probably 8 to 9 yards. But that's the only play that I remember that was a positive on an outside zone run. So I'd love to see the numbers there. Corn and Cattle says, we had 2 non-divisional games to get the offense primed for Big Ten play. In my opinion, there hasn't been any real gains. You could be right on that. There haven't been any unbelievable gains. But can anybody, and if anybody wants to call in and debate me on this, you can debate me on this. But is anybody going to deny the fact that the passing attack looked better today? It looked better today. There's no debating that. And maybe that's play calling. Maybe that's, the fact that CSU is stacking the box and letting Iowa basically have whatever they wanted over the top because they didn't believe Petrus could make the throws. Well, Petrus made the throws. So it looked better today. I'm encouraged by the passing game, but I'm discouraged by the run game. Charles Pinster, Stanzi was a more proven quarterback than Petrus to that point. However, I get what you're saying. You're absolutely right. Quarterback play is probably the biggest difference. Offensive line play that year was really good too. They ran the ball effectively. Adam Robinson, Brandon Wager. But again, they were better up front and more experienced up front. So, I believe that was, Brian Bulaga was on that team. I want to say Julian Vandervelde was on that team. Raphael Eubanks may have been on that team, who was solid at the collegiate level, never really did much in the NFL, but that was a good offensive line. This offensive line has good pieces, but they're young. So again, I'm not throwing in the flag on Iowa's run game getting better because I do believe these young guys can develop during the season. And we are 4 games in and they are 4-0, but they're running out of time to make the big gains we'd hope they'd make. Roger Edwards, how could our offense not be better against our top defense all the time in practice? Well, we could say this year after year, Roger. If you've gone to any open spring games or Kids Day in the fall, Iowa's defense always dominates Iowa's offense in practice. So you would think maybe that sorry, I beat my camera there. You would think that Iowa's offense would get better playing against a defense like Phil Parker's defense, but I mean, it's never really been the case. When's the last time Iowa has been elite offensively? 2009. They were good. I don't know about elite. I think elite might be a little bit much. They had one of the best receivers to ever play at Iowa in DJK. And then probably the other, I mean, you probably have your top 2 guys, at least in the Kirk Ferentz era, at wide receiver that year. You've got Marvin McNutt, and then you've got DJK. You had a great tight end in Tony Moyaki. You had a couple solid receivers. Colin Sandeman was on that team. Trey Strauss was on that team. And again, good offensive line and really good running backs. The running backs were young. There's a big difference between young running backs and young offensive linemen. Big difference. But I agree. Hopefully, as the season wears on, this defense will help the offense to progress. Doug Phelps, running game was not good today. Michael, our heartbeat this season is our defense. If the offense doesn't show up, we're done. I think he means defense. All right? The defense doesn't show up, we're done. Defense wins championships, according to Ray Lewis. We need a better offense to win a championship. Agree with that. The offense has to get better if Iowa was going to win the Big Ten. I think the offense has to get better to win the West. I predicted Iowa would win the West before the season even started, and I predicted Iowa would have already had a loss by now. I predicted Iowa would lose to Iowa State, and yet I still thought Iowa would win the West because I was not a huge believer in Wisconsin. I'm still not a huge believer in Wisconsin. I think Iowa can beat Wisconsin. Not saying they will, but I think they can. Right now, the toughest team on the schedule right now is Penn State. There's no question about that at all. Maryland's tough. They're going to be a tough game on a short prep week on Friday. We're going to learn a lot on Friday. Penn State's the best team on the schedule. Wisconsin's good. Nebraska looks improved. Iowa should beat Illinois. Should beat Northwestern. Purdue should win that game, but Braum always seems to show up in that game. Iowa, honestly, the defense can lead this team to probably, by itself, a 9-3 record. I would be comfortable predicting that. If the offense can improve, they can win every game left on the schedule. They really can. If the run game can start to play better, and again, it comes down to this offensive line. It comes down to play up front. This team can win every game left in their schedule. Underway shift colors. This offense is really getting tested this week. Maryland put it on Kent State today. I did not catch the score. So let me grab that real quick. I'm glad Underway Shift Colors brought this up. I'm really looking forward to that Friday game, though. I really, really am. Let's grab the score here. Yeah, you're right. 37-16. 21-point win. Iowa did win by 23. I didn't watch the game, though, so I don't know how it went. I guess I could grab the stats here. I mean, Kent State did put up 458 yards in that Maryland defense. Maryland's defense is not great. Kent State out first downed. That's a term. Maryland. Kent State had 28 first downs to Maryland's 23. Kent State outrushed Maryland. And it was actually pretty close in total yards. Both teams had a lot of penalties. Maryland actually had more turnovers. So I don't know how they won by 21 points. Kent State beat them on time of possession. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to watch that game back because I don't really see where the game was lost for Kent State. But anyways, you're right. That's going to be a test. And again, a short prep week. Not making any predictions. I predicted Iowa would lose that game preseason. I'll probably stick with that prediction from what we've seen so far. Doug Phelps, inside the tackles. I can't read that. Inside the tackles runs looked better, but Brian kept pushing for the edge. You are right on that. The outside zone running, I said it earlier, is not good right now. And again, I'm not a run expert, but the run concept, when you have a Kirk Ferentz offensive line, which it's taught the same, whether it's Tim Polasek coaching the offensive line, whether it's George Barnett coaching the offensive line. This zone scheme that Kirk Ferentz lives and breathes by, I think it's hard for young guys to adjust to. And so they obviously like Mason Richmond. They obviously like Nick DeYoung. They obviously like Connor Colby. But to me, it's going to take time for these guys to perfect this run scheme. And we've seen, again, I bring up the Paulson twins that never really, and I think their problems were more than just schematics, but never really progressed. So, but again, these guys are young, so I'm not saying they can't figure it out. And Iowa did run the ball effectively last year. I know it was a COVID year, but they ran the ball well last year. You can only put so much lipstick on this pig of an offense. They threw the ball better today. Maybe I'm lying to myself, but they did throw the ball better today. Joseph Walters, Penn State's going to be tough even in Kinnick. Clayton Smith, this is quintessential Iowa. Not pretty. W's are W's. It's hard for me to not be happy. It's a good attitude to have. 4-0 is 4-0. I know we all won't be skeptics, but and I don't know how much I can beat a dead horse. I've been beating a dead horse about this offense every single week on my podcast. And I guess it's an opportunity to kind of put a plug in for my podcast. If you haven't already, go over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube and subscribe. Weekly podcast, weekly picks for each week of college football. Any content we post to Iowa at the Voice of College Football, you can get earlier without having to pay me on Patreon. I get it. Patreon's part of how YouTubers live and breathe now. But you do not have to be subscribed to Patreon to get my picks early. Again, get them over on From the Hawkeye of the Storm. But if you want all of Mark Rogers' media picks from all his different media outlets in the Voice of College Football realm, you can subscribe to his Patreon. But you can get my picks over From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. And again, our weekly podcast. You can also find it Spotify, Anchor, Amazon, Google, Apple, all that good stuff. So From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube if you haven't already subscribed. Charles Pinster says, I believe Spencer needs to learn how to step up in the pocket and throw by time. Yes. You saw Nate Stanley make the jump in his play when he was able to do so. I think Petrus is capable. One thing we observed during the game as we were watching the game here is Spencer is easily thrown to the ground. You think of Spencer Petrus as a big guy. He is a big guy, not quite as big, I think, all around as Nate Stanley was. But Stanley was a guy who was hard to bring to the ground. There was a play in the second half today where it didn't seem like the defensive lineman who had Spencer really had him very well. He was wrapped up low, and Spencer just kind of collapsed, just kind of fell. And that's kind of Spencer Petrus in a nutshell as far as evasion. He is not good at staying on his feet when he gets hit. He's just not. And I agree. We've talked about this before, but he tends to try to scramble left and right as opposed to step forward in the pocket. He's getting pressure from the outsides. The interior looks better. And I think that's probably because you've got better interior linemen. And I think it comes down to just simply that. You've got more experience on the inside. You've got better skill on the inside. You've got Tyler Linderbaum. You've got Kyler Schott. You've got Cody Ince, along with Justin Britt. You've got four guys who I think Spencer probably feels pretty well about. They all played well last year. The difference is you've got two freshman tackles. So I agree with this comment. He's got to step up in the pocket and make some plays. Now, he did a couple times today, but again, today he also took a couple sacks, and there were a couple times where he's got to throw the ball away. And again, that comes back to decision-making. Charles Spencer, did Auburn get beat by Georgia? Listen, I am so zeroed into Iowa football on Saturdays that I kind of get my fix of college football after the fact. So let's let's check in on some scores here while we're waiting for Coach Don Patterson. Again, former Iowa coach Don Patterson will be with us shortly. We're counting down the minutes for Don to show up here and talk about Iowa. Tennessee leads number 11 number 11 Florida right now, 14-10. Number 20 Michigan State up on Nebraska 7-0. How about this? Number 25 Kansas State trailing Oklahoma State 27-10. Alabama leads Southern Miss 14-0 in the first quarter. Akron leading number 10 Ohio State 6-0 first quarter. North Carolina, number 21 in the country, leading Georgia Tech 7-0. Penn State beat Villanova. Notre Dame, of course, blew out Wisconsin. Georgia defeats Vanderbilt by 62. Northwestern over Ohio. Minnesota. That is not a good loss for the Big Ten. Losing to Bowling Green 14-10. Let's slide down to Texas A&M, number 7 in the country. Loses to number 16 Arkansas 20-10. We mentioned this earlier. Another loss that does not help Iowa. Number 14 Iowa State losing to Baylor. And I know some Iowa fans will say, well, we want Iowa State to lose whenever. I don't believe in that at all. That's when you beat Iowa State, especially, you want them to continue to play well. And the loss at Baylor won't help. Although Baylor is undefeated. So there's that. 31-29, the Bears over the Cyclones. Purdue squeaked by Illinois 13-10. Maryland over Kent State 37-16. North Carolina State. I predicted this one. Again, let me put another plug in for this. Okay, I usually try not to promote myself too much on here. We're talking about Iowa postgame with the voice of college football. But example of what you're going to get if you subscribe to my channel. Early picks. Again, you'll get these Friday evening each week. I predicted North Carolina State would beat Clemson. They'd cover the spread and they'd win straight up. That's exactly what happened. North Carolina State over number 9 Clemson 27-21. Number 19 Michigan over Rutgers 20-13. Auburn beat Georgia State. There's your answer. Whoever said that Georgia State beat Auburn, that is not true. Auburn wins by 10. Duke blows out Kansas. And that's all we've got so far. We've got some games just starting. And so we'll try to keep everybody updated as we continue here on the podcast. Underway shift colors. Like you, I'm a huge Hawk fan, but I'm a realist. This team has the ceiling that is never ending, but they really need to figure out this darn offense. I agree. But the ceiling to me is not set in place. Again, I go back to the offensive line. If this offensive line can continue to get better, the ceiling changes. But if the offensive line doesn't get better and the run game doesn't get better, then Iowa's in trouble. We want to welcome Coach Don Patterson here. I see he's just signing on. We're going to give him another minute here to jump on here, and then we'll add him to the stream. Don?
Yes, Corey.
Well, I appreciate it, and give me your initial reactions. Iowa wins 24-14, and it was a battle the entire way through. Not the type of win Iowa fans were hoping for, but a win is a win.
You're right. It reminded me, it was kind of an old-fashioned football game. Both teams were hoping to establish the run. Sadly, we had a lot of difficulty in doing so. Thank God we didn't forget about one option being just to try to throw it over their head. That seemed to work pretty well. And it's frustrating, when you sputter on offense, but I give Colorado State a lot of credit for that. I'll remind people that they held Toledo to 6 points last weekend. So it's not as if we're going up against a bunch of Humpties. These guys are big and strong and very motivated to play in front of 70,000. They don't get that opportunity very often.
One of the major storylines, at least with the fans here early, Don, we've had a lot of comments already on the show. People are frustrated, I think primarily with Spencer. But here's my thing. Spencer played better today, didn't he? I mean, he hit on obviously he hit on more passes down the field than he has all season. They seem to finally get a receiver to emerge that is capable of taking the top off the defense in Keegan Johnson. We hope that continues. But Didn't Spencer play better today? Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, it's hard for me to say that for sure, but I see the same plays that upset the fans. I see those same plays too, and some of them are head scratchers. You think about it. If you take away a couple of deep throws that we're able to hit with our freshmen, our numbers would look pretty pathetic at that point. If you didn't have what were those 2 plays worth? 100 yards.
Keegan Johnson. Let me pop up Keegan Johnson's stats here, Don. I don't have the numbers. He had 2 receptions for 92 yards. So
yeah. So where are we without those 92 yards? Thank God for a couple of go routes.
But you got to give Spencer credit for hitting them, right, Don? I mean, he did hit those passes on the money.
If you wanted to grade him on the variety of passes you have to throw in a game, the best grade he would get would be for the go routes, the up and over throws. They showed good touch, good distance. Receiver didn't have to slow it much at all. Couldn't throw them much better. So that was the best thing Spencer did today, is throw the deep ball. I flashed back on a guy years and years ago. If there are any listeners that are my age, they might remember a guy that played for the Oakland Raiders years ago by the name of Darryl LaMonica, and they called him the Mad Bomber. You'd have to be a Raiders fan, I guess, to know all that. But for a second, I flashed back to Darryl LaMonica from the Oakland Raiders and his ability to throw the ball deep. And so that's the best thing Spencer did today, is throw the deep ball.
And Don, one of the comments that I did not agree with, and I'm not trying to pick on James, but this was a comment made earlier. He says, do you think no other QB on the roster could hit guys that are wide open? Here's my problem with that question. We had a quarterback in Nate Stanley who consistently had problems hitting on deep routes. So it is possible to not, it's not like, anybody and everybody is going to be able to hit a wide open go route. Spencer made those throws, didn't underthrow, didn't overthrow. He did have a couple pass plays that were, the high throw to Laporta. I think it was in the second quarter.
Right.
There was way too much steam behind that ball. And then he had a ball. I thought it was going to be a touchdown, honestly, to Sam Laporta that he
in the dirt. Oh, yeah. I was thinking of the one in the dirt.
That one, Don, and I know you were at the game. That one, he was hit on the follow through, because that was a bad throw, but he was hit by the defensive lineman on the follow through. His arm got hit. So
gotcha.
I think that certainly was the reason for that grounder. But there was a play earlier in the game on a deep route for Sam that Spencer overthrew that probably would have been a touchdown.
Yeah.
But I just don't think you can't just guarantee that any other quarterback on this roster would be able to make those open throws.
Well, let's back up. Let's back up if we can, Corey. One of the complaints I had from time to time with Nate is because he overthrew deep receivers that were open.
Yes.
And for that matter, let's think back to last fall with Spencer. Spencer, if you go back and look at the games, there were some overthrown deep balls a year ago. So at the very least, we have to give him credit for maybe solving that problem. It wasn't a problem today.
Yeah. And I know people a lot of fans don't want to give Spencer credit right now because they're frustrated. The defense has been really, really good all year, although I thought they got exposed against Kent State last week. And, during a couple plays, I thought the entire first half was a struggle today defensively. They struggled to contain McBride. They struggled with Centeo. But overall, the defense has been tremendous. So I understand the frustration with Spencer. What did you see from the defense, Don? Did it seem – I know Ed Podolak talked about this. At least this is what I was told he talked about during his broadcast on the radio today, that one of the issues, it seemed to him, was that Colorado State had brought out an odd man front, which was not what Iowa expected. And it took some time for Phil Parker to adjust. Did you see that? Again, I don't know how much you were reading into the defensive front.
I'm confused. Are you talking about their defensive front? Or are you talking about their?
Oh, excuse me. I meant. What am I talking about? Ed Podolak brought up their offense.
They played an out front. They played an out front, son. Yeah. I did hear on the radio a minute ago. Kirk did acknowledge that they changed up a little bit for us, and it took a little adjustment on our part. It may sound simple, but when you think about all the plays that might be run, it's not hard to imagine. It might be a little bit confusing if your preparation was front that you're not seeing much of. I do know they also pressured us more, I think, than what they've shown on previous games. I think Kirk thought maybe it was going to be 35% pressure. Maybe it was higher than that. Kirk at least thought so. I heard that comment from Kirk after the game.
Yeah, and again, if I'm misquoting Ed Podolak, I saw this in a tweet, just a comment about what he was talking about. But it did seem like in the second half, Phil figured whatever it was that was causing Centeo to consistently get open space, and McBride he's just a load at tight end. But Iowa seemed to figure out how to contain both guys in the second half.
I don't think I've ever seen so many nakeds in one football game as today. That's just a big part of what they do. And we hit them with quite a few nakeds also. So it was play action roll passes away from the play action any number of times for both teams. I think we got a little bit drunk on trick plays there for a while. We ran the one that bit us in the butt really was the fumbled exchange, of course, to Charlie that took us back out of the red zone. At least we got 3 out of that drive, as I recall. And that was a big 3 because 10 points looks a lot different than 7.
Right. Charles Penster comments here, Don, that he believes Spencer needs to learn to step up in the pocket. We talked about this earlier. He seems to be getting more pressure from the outside than the inside. I know that's maybe a juvenile thing to observe, but would that be accurate in saying that most of the pressure is coming from the tackles?
I think so. I think you got to realize that if it's a typical 4-man rush, it doesn't really matter if it's a 3-down front or a 4-down front. If you're playing with 3-down linemen, the odds are you're going to rush an outside linebacker from one side or the other to equate to the same 4-man rush that you got out of 4-down fronts. So if you think about a typical 4-down front or just a 4-man rush, wherever it might come from, the guys that are isolated one-on-one are the offensive tackles. Those inside rushers, if you think about it, we've got a center and 2 guards to account for 2 down guys. And the way pass protection works, those 2 guys that are playing with their hands on the ground, we have to be responsible for them. But logically, of course, our 5 need to be able to block 5 defenders, 4 of which we expect to come, 1 of which we don't think is coming. So typically, the center and the guard, one side or the other, will work the down guy up to a linebacker, if that makes sense to you. So the guys that have difficulty, the tackles are both one-on-one. We'll get into chip as an option a little bit later. And the other guy that's really got his hands full is typically an offensive guard versus a 3 technique. I don't know if you know what a 3 technique is, Corey. It's a guy that lines up outside shade of an offensive guard. So he's sitting in what we call he's defending the B gap. The A gap is center guard gap. The B gap is guard tackle gap. So if I'm a left guard and there's a 3 technique sitting out here on my outside shoulder, I'm going to have to block him one-on-one.
Okay.
It's logical that we would do it that way because on the other side of the ball, if you just move from the left guard over to the right guard position, there's probably a defensive lineman sitting there in that A gap. In other words, he's in the gap between the center and the right guard. If he's sitting there, then you can bet that the pass protection, the normal way to do it, would be for us to account for the guy there in the A gap and have our eyes up to protect against a guy that's at the next level, one of those linebackers. So that's how protection works. And that puts a little pressure on the tackles, obviously, because they don't have any help. And that's where you get into chipping with a back. A back to that side might be instructed, go ahead, and the tackle knows when he has help. Of course, it's part of the game plan. So that the back gets set up, and if the guy's trying to beat our tackle up the field, then obviously that back can sit there, and you can't be real aggressive because you don't want to knock the guy off of the tackle, but you're simply funneling him back onto the tackle, if you will. You're stunting his charge and helping the tackle to recover. And for that matter, when the tackle's in good shape, you go ahead and release into your route. You're just talking about chipping on the guy. If you get to him before the tackle does, that's fine too. You just blunt his progress and give our tackle an easier assignment than what he would otherwise have.
Don, comment here that Maryland looks like a quick strike team. Yeah, we know. I mean, they are obviously apparently they look good against Kent State. Obviously, I didn't watch that game. I'm sure you'll watch that game back, Don. But
I don't even know if I can find it on TV. It was not on in real time today. It was a 2:30 game, and I think the Big Ten Network.
They gave us the other one. I think it was Illinois Purdue that they televised.
Yeah, we got the wrong game. We got Illinois, Purdue. You're right. So I don't know.
That'll help for
Maybe,
later.
I know what'll happen. We'll get it. We'll at least get the 60-minute version off the Big Ten Network. That'll be the first chance I'll have to see it, is the condensed version.
Michael Brobston, I don't trust our offense as much as our defense. Well, yeah, I would obviously agree with that. Corn and cattle, another thing we all need to remember is that we are a huge target for teams wanting to make a name for themselves with the top 5 rating. Yep. Don, you said it. Hunted now.
Yeah, we're the hunted. Yeah, that just goes with the territory. If you're not prepared for that, then you shouldn't be playing football.
And Michael says, do we really deserve to be number 5? Maybe that will help us beat Maryland and Penn State. Well, the rankings not going to help anything. You got to go out and play football, and I'd rather there not be rankings at this point. To me, they make no sense. Why do we even have the AP and the coaches poll when they mean nothing? The college football playoff poll is what decides the playoff in the end anyways.
Coach Fry had a phrase for that. It was called, the answer was coffee talk. It's just coffee talk. Something for the fans to talk about.
All right, let's see here. I do have a few questions of mine that I want to get to for you, Don. If you didn't notice, Iowa State lost to Baylor today.
So, I knew they were behind. I didn't know. I didn't hear a final, but I knew they were down by.
I think it was a 2 or 3 point loss. I'd have to look back at the score. That's not good for Iowa. Now you got Indiana with 2 losses and Iowa State with 2 losses. Now I get it. You can't control what your opponents do, but those 2 wins don't look quite as good as we thought they'd look.
Right. And if you're a voter, of course, you take all those things into account.
John Daufeld, at least 2 dropped interceptions. The one early from Jack Kerner, I would consider that a drop. That would have been a tough catch to make, but he had it. And I don't know the other ones were really drops. Jacobs came close on a deflection late in the game, as did Y.A. Black at the line of scrimmage. There may have been one that I'm missing. And Doug does say 2-point loss by State. John Daufeld, coffee talk. I love Coach Fry. I like that comment. Okay, let's get to a couple of my concerns, or at least questions that I like to throw out to you as I make notes during the game, Don. And a couple of these are kind of inconsequential moving forward, but I am curious as to your viewpoint on these. Let me get the score up for anybody who's new or who's just tuning in now to our show. Pop up the score here: 24-14 Iowa over Colorado State. Okay. I become more and more frustrated every week with Iowa running the ball on 3rd and 11 at their own 8-yard line. Are we just? Explain it to me, Don, for a fan who doesn't know better, I guess.
Well, if it were a draw play, I would be able to defend it a little bit better. Because a draw play, of course, is supposed to have the best chance when the defensive line is really charging hard up the field, right? But it wasn't even a draw play you're referring to. It was some kind of zone.
Well, they ran one draw play with Pottebaum, the fullback, on I think it was 3rd and 11. Are you really expecting Pottebaum to get 11 yards on a draw play on 3rd and 11?
No.
So why are we running that play? We're just giving up on the drive and saying we want to give the some space?
Well, I do know this. I'm pretty sure we were beaten today on critical down conversion success. And I say that only because I'm aware that they converted in one drive. They converted twice on 3rd and 11, once on 3rd and 9, and all in the same drive. Maybe that was their second touchdown drive, I think. But as you mentioned, we got into 3rd and long, 3rd and extra long far too often. And in general, we didn't convert. You can even argue that we didn't really try to convert. But I think one reason we might be conservative at that moment is we have a lot of faith in our defense and we have a lot of faith in our punter and our punt coverage. So we think we can flip the field and play defense.
And they were going with the win there, and ended up being the drive that I'm thinking of ended up being the shanked punt from Taylor. So in hindsight, it didn't look very good. But again, they were going with the win, so theoretically he could have flipped the field the way Taylor punts, but that was not one of his better punts.
Right.
Here was a kind of a weird thing, and I thought you would notice it as a coach, Don. So I believe this was end of the first quarter, and there was probably 30 seconds left. Colorado State had the ball. They had the wind at their backs. It's third down, and they wait until probably 4 or 5 seconds to snap it on third down, which makes sense. You'd snap it before the quarter changes and you lose the wind. So they snap it, but the problem is they waited so long that by the time the play was over, the quarter had ended, and then they had to punt into the wind to start the second quarter. And I remember saying it to myself while I was watching the game, why didn't they snap it earlier to ensure that they were able to punt with the wind? Did you notice that at the end of the first?
Well, to my knowledge now, of course, it's hard for me to tell. I don't know exactly what the wind's doing down on the field, but I do recall, and of course, I noticed the flags in the stadium all the time. I think officially the wind was out of the west today. So I remember thinking, even this morning, the wind's not much of a factor because it's going to be a crosswind. I do think as the day played out, the wind shifted a little bit to the southwest, and maybe that's what you're talking about.
That's what it seemed like to me, but again, you were there, so you would know what the wind was doing better.
I don't think the wind was a huge effect.
Okay.
Just a slight effect because it was primarily a crosswind.
Okay. Well, that answers my questions. Excessive celebration penalty. I hate this rule, and it seems like it is not enforced consistently. I don't know what the criteria is to flag guys. Why is it flagged on some players and not others? Why did Laporta get one today?
Well, you saw specifically why he got it, right?
He spun the ball in the end zone. Is that
why? That's it.
Who cares? Why are we flagging these guys for this?
Good question.
What a waste of training.
The irony, of course, is contrast that to what the NFL does on Sunday. Every time they score.
What are the rules for the NFL for celebration?
There are no rules for celebration. Apparently, they just do anything and everything.
They do whatever.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know. It seems crazy that he didn't taunt another player, or he didn't even acknowledge the crowd. Sometimes they play to the crowd, and sometimes that doesn't get flagged. Typically, just a week ago, I remember Tyler scoring, and as he scored, he reacted to the people in the end zone. He was just acknowledging, "I'm happy that you're happy." I think that was really all he was doing. It was a very innocent movement on his part. He was not flagged a week ago for it. And yet spinning the ball in the end zone is a foul. So it seems a little silly. It does. I'll admit that.
Well, and I guess the way I look at it is let the guys do what they want unless there's a taunting, which is a different penalty, right? I mean, that's a totally different penalty. Call taunting, or if it's a delay of game, if they're delaying the flow of the game, then I'm fine with the flag. But I don't know why we're wasting our time. We've got other issues with the targeting penalties, which I think are just right now the criteria for targeting is messed up.
And people might say, well, it's not that big a deal. Well, yeah, it is actually, because we have to kick off from the 20-yard line. And remember what happened on that kickoff?
Yes.
Hooked out of bounds, and all of a sudden they are 1st and 10 at the 50-yard line.
Yeah, and they ended. Yeah, I mean, Iowa had all the momentum, but it could have switched like that because of field position.
Yep.
So
absolutely true.
Okay. Did it seem to you at all, Don, and maybe it was just the offensive line, there weren't a whole lot of large lanes for Tyler Goodson to attack. Did he seem to you like he was a bit hesitant today? He seems to make his cuts quicker and hit the holes harder in a typical week. He just seemed hesitant to me.
I think probably if we could talk to Tyler right now, he would say, well, I was just a little confused as to where to go. A back, of course, runs to daylight, and there really weren't very many good options a lot of the time. And that forces him to appear to be more hesitant because he's simply searching for a path, and there's not one to materialize that's a very good choice. I think that was his problem today. And I know he got loose one time for 26 or 27 yards, I think, but otherwise nothing above 10 yards, I don't think. They did a good job of keeping us bottled up. No long runs. We ended up rushing for what, less than 60 yards maybe? When you factor in.
Yeah, if you're counting in sacks, Iowa rushed for 54 yards. Goodson by himself, Don. Tyler Goodson ran for 57 yards, 3.2 an attempt. But if you combine that with sacks and, of course, what Ivory Kelly-Martin did and Gavin Williams on his couple of attempts, Iowa ended up with 2.2 yards per carry.
Yeah.
And that number, that is my biggest takeaway from today, Don, of this game, is Iowa's inability to run the ball effectively. To me, I know that this is probably an underrated Colorado State team, Don, but don't you have to be able to run the ball well against a Mountain West team at home?
Well, I made a comment to the guy sitting in front of me. I simply stated at the end of the game, I said, it's hard to win a football game if you don't run the ball effectively. And we experienced that today. We found a way to win the game, but it was a struggle. And frankly, if we couldn't hit a couple of up and over throws and couldn't get a really, really short field one time, what was that, a 6 or 7 yard touchdown drive? It would have been a game that would have probably gone right to the wire. So we're fortunate that we were able to have a double-digit win, a 10-point win. At least it's not a one-score win. Those one-score wins, of course, you're sweating it out right to the last snap. And one thing we do have to work on, there was a time, thankfully it wasn't a one-score game, but late, we have what we call 4-minute offense. Let me explain. Everybody knows what 2-minute offense is. You may or may not know what 4-minute offense is. 4-minute offense is entirely different than 2-minute. 4-minute involves you being ahead and protecting a lead and burning clock. And we didn't do that as quickly as I wished we would have. I do recall with about maybe 3 minutes left, we snapped the ball with 11 seconds on the clock. It may not sound like a big deal, but let's face it, if you get right to the end, every second does matter. And just something for us to be aware of. I think we went to 4-minute mode, I think the very next snap, as I recall. So we didn't waste a bunch of we didn't give them a lot of extra time by virtue of the fact that we didn't eat clock. We did a pretty good job eating clock. From that point forward, we did. There's at least 1 or 2 snaps I felt where we should have been more attentive to the clock and snapped the ball later just to burn more clock.
Okay, I'm going to gripe some more, and you're here, Don, to kind of rein me in. But under a minute to go, the game is sealed. Why is Spencer Petras on the field?
I guess because we're afraid that Padilla is going to drop the snap. I guess. The other thing about it,
that seems like you don't have faith enough in your backup quarterback to make a handoff to Gavin Williams.
Just out of curiosity, was 65 still in at center? I bet he was.
That I don't know. He probably was. Sure. He probably was.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
We seem to be much more willing to make subs late in the game defensively than offensively. It seems like at running back, skill position players, we have no problem making subs for younger guys. But, even on that last drive for Centeo and the Brams, Iowa had its third unit on the defensive line in the game. And so, obviously, Phil Parker has trust in those guys. You just wish that Brian and Kirk had trust in the backup positions at quarterback and on the line late in games, because you hate to see Spencer or Tyler go down late.
Well, I honestly wondered, of course, when they turned the ball over on downs, we were on the plus 15 or something. And I was just curious if we were going to take a knee or not. That was the first. Yeah, that was my question. And I don't want to read too much into this, but I'll put it this way. I think if Kirk and Adazio were longtime friends, my guess is at that point we'd have taken a knee. The fact that they're not longtime friends gave us reason to go ahead and run a couple of plays, maybe.
Now, when you say they're not longtime friends, Don, do you know something I don't know as far as their relationship?
I don't. I just have known Steve Adazio for a long time, and let's just say he's not one of my favorite people. I don't know how Kirk feels about him, but I have an idea of how I feel about him. I was coaching in Connecticut when he was coaching at Boston College, so I'm familiar with him. And for that matter, when we were at Buffalo, we were butting heads with Boston College then too.
And obviously, Kirk coached against him when he was at Indiana as well.
I didn't even realize that Adazio had been in Indiana. When was he in Indiana?
Let me look it up here, Don. I researched this earlier in the week. I've got it here. Hold on just a second.
He was at 10 years ago.
Yeah, he was at Indiana from 03 to 2000. 02 to 2004. He was OC in 2004 only, but he was
Okay.
O-line coach from 02 to 03.
Okay, way back in time. Who knows what might have happened back then? I don't know, but I just knew he wasn't my favorite coach. I'll say it that way. When I was back east coaching, and
well, if that's the case with Kirk, and I don't know if that's the case, Don, but I was in my back of my head, I'm thinking, I know that Kirk is not a style points coach. I get that, but 31 to 14 would look a lot better than 24 to 14 if you are in late November competing for a playoff spot. Am I correct?
Yeah, and yet you don't want to throw the ball into the end zone because you get roasted for that. But nothing says you couldn't run a couple of plays, and if we score, we score, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just thought if we're not going to throw, why not run with, and we're going to put Gavin Williams into the game, then let Padilla hand off to him. But again, that's just me.
You're right. I do recall a year ago, just thinking back to analytics from last fall, there was a time or two when Ohio State had the game won, and I was mildly surprised when I noticed they didn't always take a knee. Sometimes they continued to run plays. They didn't throw the ball, but they simply ran plays, and they were in the red zone already. And I think the thought process, you bring up a good point, Corey. Is it maybe the difference, just realizing people look at final scores, is it a difference in making the playoffs and not making the playoffs? You could argue last year in Ohio State's case, you could argue that might have an element of truth to it.
And to me, and maybe this isn't how coaches look at it, maybe Adazio would have taken offense to it, but if you were to put Padilla in the game and run a couple pass plays, you could at least give the persona of, and I know you don't want to throw a pick in that situation, but if you were to do that, like a naked boot, like you recommended for Alex several times, if you were to do that, you could at least say, well, we're just trying to get our backup some snaps, and you could also gain some style points if you score.
Right. Very true.
So
honestly, if you put in the backup, I know I, as a head coach, if the other team was going to win the game and they put in a backup and he threw the ball late in the game, I certainly wasn't going to be critical of the coach for doing that because I'm recognizing they're trying to get him some actual game experience. And it's something other than handing the ball off.
Yeah, I would not have had an issue with that at all. Doug Phelps says Ohio State is in trouble this year. I saw they were down early to Akron. I have not seen a score here recently.
That would be earth-shattering.
It would be. Charles Pinster says Adrian Martinez was knocked out of the Nebraska game early. So that's something to follow.
I did see that Michigan State went up early second quarter, 7-0.
I did see they were up. I saw they were up 7-0. Okay, Joseph says, what is Coach Don's perspective of the O-line? We had a long conversation about this before you got on, Don. My perspective of the O-line, let me just give you my take, and then you can kind of take it from there. And I'm comparing the struggles on the offensive line this year to 2019. I always compare to 2019 because to me it was clear that Iowa just was very deficient with guard play. They had two super seniors basically with Levi and Landon Paulson who struggled on the interior. And to me, the struggles against Michigan, the struggles against Penn State that year were not going to be corrected midseason. To me, those were issues that were probably just issues we had to live with given the fact that these guys were, again, super seniors. To me, this line has an opportunity to develop because they are freshmen. I mean, three of the five starters today were freshmen in Colby, Richmond, and DeYoung. So I think there's a lot of room for this line to grow mid-season, Don. Am I wrong on that, or how do you see it?
No, you're correct. You're correct. And a lot of people might want to make an issue of the fact that we have a new offensive line coach. Let's not forget that it's not his job all alone. I believe there's a former O-line coach that's pretty good by the name of Kirk Ferentz too. And for that matter, Brian Ferentz. So, and I like the new offensive line coach. I think they made a good hire there. I knew he used to coach at Illinois State when I was at Western Illinois. And they had outstanding O-line play back when he was coaching there. So I think it's simply a case of having a lot of young players, and it's not easy to become a really productive starter as a young player, especially in the O-line, because there's not just a mental aspect, there's a physical aspect to it also. And, they're getting bigger, stronger, faster, but you don't do that overnight. It takes a little bit of time. And they'll get there. And in the meantime, they're going to be smarter about how to play football than they were a month ago. So we're moving in the right direction. It's kind of painful sometimes to make that slow but sure move, but that's where we are.
Boy, again, McBride, to me, he looks like an NFL tight end, Don. And his final numbers weren't out of this world. I had the stat sheet in front of me a second ago, and I went off of it. But how impressed were you with him at tight end?
Well, I did see the TV copy of the Toledo game, and they really target him a lot. They have great faith in him, and they should. And I can't even argue with the fact that so many of their passes go his direction and don't go anywhere else. But obviously, over the entire season, teams are really, you might even get into some gimmick defense to take away him versus Durham to throw to some of these other guys. And I don't know that we played anything that would resemble a gimmick defense today. We certainly had an awareness of him. I know Kirk commented, sometimes you see a guy on video and you appreciate him even more when you see him from the sideline. And Kirk felt that way about number 85 today. He said, that guy's even better than we thought he was. So I don't know what his final numbers were, but I'm sure he would tell you he had to fight hard for every yard that he gained as a receiver because we didn't make it easy on him.
He is such a big guy. I mean, he's hard to bring down, and he's actually fast for his size. He runs good routes. I don't know how Colorado State got him and his brother, and they're both really solid players. Maybe the two best players on their respective sides of the ball.
Yeah, the other McBride is 0, isn't he? That's his brother, huh?
He might be. He seemed to be whatever number he is. He was all over the field.
Yeah, there's a defensive guy, I believe. McBride is 0, as I recall.
I believe you're right. I've got it here. Yes, he is number 0. So, yeah, and he ended up with 5 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. So, yeah, he looked good. His brother looked good at tight end. And this is a better Colorado State team than their record, Don. There's no question about that.
Yeah, you know what was interesting? Isn't it hard to imagine that on opening day, South Dakota State beat them by 19? All I can tell you is they weren't very good in game 1, and they've obviously gotten a lot better in game 3 and game 4.
Yeah, and they couldn't have been very good in game 2 because Vanderbilt is terrible.
You're right. So, you're right. 62-0 today, right?
Oh, yeah. Georgia. And again, I understand it's the SEC, but for them to lose to Vanderbilt, but again, I think it's a different team. I agree with you, and we saw that last week against Toledo. It wasn't just today. If you want to make a phone call here in the last 15, 20 minutes of our show, 860-499-3332, 860-499-3332. Ask Don a question about the game or this Iowa defense or offense moving forward. Okay. John Dodfeld did make a valid comment. Defense still only allowed 14 points. I will take that any game. Boy, at the end of the first half, again, the defense only really gave up 7 points. I mean, that interception from Spencer, which, by the way, Don, was a terrible decision. I don't understand how Spencer makes that throw on a bubble screen to Tracy when there's nothing there. Don, what did you see on that one?
Well, I didn't see all the angles maybe you saw on television, but first off, when you run that play, don't be coming. You're the outside receiver now. It was thrown to number 3, as I recall, right? When you make that break inside, if you have any reason to suspect he's going to run hard inside with you, then you got to run with speed. You got to run with speed, and you got to expect the ball under your chin, because obviously if you're running hard back to the quarterback, then obviously you got to be sure that the ball is down, because a high ball again might get tipped and of course might be intercepted. So the bottom line, I think maybe Tracy was a little too much on the line of scrimmage, which gave that defender a chance to barely race him to the ball and slice right through his left shoulder. And that's what happened. The ball you don't have to throw that, pull it down and run. But it obviously didn't develop very well. And we should have an inside receiver should be in position to try to kick on that guy that's chasing a receiver inside. And obviously that didn't get done either. I know Kirk's comment was we screwed that play up in more ways than one. So that told me that there were several shortcomings on that play. But the most obvious, of course, is Spencer throwing the ball when it didn't look good from the get-go. The obvious thing he could have done is throw the ball back here on Tracy's right shoulder, throw it away from the defender again. Instead, he hit him a little bit on his left side, which gave that defender a chance to come through and play the ball.
Question here for you, Don, from Charles Pinster. How can the Hawks start more quickly on offense, in your opinion?
Well, the thing that comes to mind for me, it wouldn't bother me at all if we ran a few key breakers early in the game. Another example is an exotic early in the game. That's a good way to make another team a little bit tentative, is to hit them with an exotic that'll work. Some kind of misdirection play. We ran a nice one on the goal line for the touchdown. And it doesn't have to be anything that crazy. The first touchdown that Michigan State scored tonight against Nebraska was simply a flea flicker. It was pitched back to the quarterback. They started into the line, pitched it back, threw it over Nebraska's head. Now, it was early second quarter, but still, it's the first score of the game.
Would have been a touchdown. Should have been a touchdown.
Yeah, and they did. They scored on it, yeah.
Oh, they did? Are you sure they scored on that one, Don?
Yeah, I'm sure. I just saw it a while ago.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure. So the bottom line, here's what to remember, too, about misdirection plays early in the game. Let's imagine even if it doesn't hit, it still has an effect on the defense because it slows down pursuit. Maybe you don't go for 40 yards, you go for 4. Well, at least you're reminding them, you better not forget, because there is a certain amount of misdirection in our offense. And that's going to slow down the pursuit from that point forward.
Okay, here. John made an interesting comment here. Don might remember, he says he's old enough to remember Coach Fry going really conservative on those 3rd and longs, especially with Reggie Roby.
Well, it depends on the game situation, obviously. If you feel good about how your defense matches up and you feel good about your punter, then the first thing you have to do is not beat yourself. And on 3rd and long, I think we can do better than just running a zone play. I'd like to think at least it could be maybe a key breaker again. Maybe it is a one-back run with our fullback. That didn't work today, but it worked a week ago. You remember we had 1st and goal at the 9 and ran the ball for 5 yards with our fullback. And there's no way Kent State expected that. No one did. Even those that follow football didn't expect that to happen. It certainly had all the markings of pass. It was a one-back formation with a fullback in the backfield. That's pass. Who are we kidding? But not that time. And today it didn't work, the one-back draw with our fullback. But it's still an okay thought. If you're going to take a chance on 3rd and long, you could still argue, well, that's not a bad argument. Now, I guess the only negative, if it's 3rd and 11, you said, I think.
Yeah.
Can number 38 go for 11 yards? I understand he can run for 5.
Well, I misspoke. That one was 3rd and 9. The other one was 3rd and 11, yeah.
Yeah, 3rd and 9, that's hard. You got a better chance with 15 carrying the ball, of course. Yeah. Incidentally, didn't you notice this? Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that number 21's first snap today in the game was from the -7 yard line. Is that true? I think that's the first time he was in.
Okay, I didn't notice that, but I know he didn't get very many carries today, Don. That was an observation. Well,
the only reason I noticed is the PA announcer said, in at running back now, Ivory Kelly Martin. And I remember thinking, oh my God, on the -7 yard line? Well, that's one way to show confidence in him, is to put him in when we're backed up to our goal line. And he ran the ball, maybe both times we're on that drive, I think. Because like you say, that might have been the only possession he had all day. I'm not sure. But he carried it okay, and no harm, no foul. He made it through the game without a negative play. So that's a step in the right direction.
Don, some comments here about the celebrations. NCAA needs to start understanding that they work for the entertainment industry. Celebration should be welcome. Doug Phillips Wadley lost a touchdown on that one. That was against North Texas in 2017, I believe.
He must have been high stepping before he scored, maybe. Is that what happened?
Yep.
Stepping before he got across the goal line.
You got it. Doug Phelps, Linderbaum was fun to watch today. Linderbaum did get beat on one play. It was a sack on Iowa, I think, was inside their own 10. And a sack that Linderbaum kind of whiffed on the CSU defensive tackle. But, he played. I think he seems to be solid each and every week. Where was Lachey today? Didn't really see him on the field at all. There was one pass play that was intended for Lachey, and Lachey dropped it, Don.
Yeah, tough chances I recall, but still it's a ball I think that would probably be ruled as a drop. I think they had a defender in the area, but regardless of that, an opportunity that he needs to make good
on. Roger Edwards giving us an update on Ohio State. They are leading 21-7 right now.
And I understand without their quarterback, right?
Yeah, I don't believe C.J. Stroud is playing. I don't believe. Again, I haven't had a chance to flip that game on yet. Here's an interesting comment from Doug. It appeared often we expect the players to make plays after the catch instead of making the yards to gain with the pass. I don't feel like that was the case today, Don, because, again, they took a lot of shots down the field. I mean, they kind of took what Colorado State gave them, and they were doing so successfully for the most part.
Right. And I think the key, we talked about this last week, the key, nothing says you have to throw the ball beyond the chains, but if you don't throw it beyond the chains, you better give your receiver a chance to catch it and run with the catch. And that means the ball placement needs to be good. Maybe it's a route that's slanting down the field. A quick slant's a good example. Maybe it's a crack swing versus man coverage. Maybe it's thrown behind the line, but you recognize it's man coverage. And now that receiver to the side of the swing route, he's cracking on the guy that's manned up on the running back. Of course, the corner that's manned up on him has got to go with him because he doesn't know if it's a crack swing or not. And that's a good sound play where the ball's thrown not just short of the chains, but thrown behind the line even.
Don, one more note here. And then I think we can take the rest of the evening to enjoy some college football at home. The safety or the safety that was not called. I don't know how that play was not reviewed, or at least the following play was not stopped to review it. To me, it looked like the ball carrier for Colorado State was in the end zone. I don't think the whole ball was out of the end zone. Of course, it has to be for it not to be a safety.
Well, that's what some people don't understand. The entire length of the ball has to be out of the end zone. And it was close. There wasn't a good angle in the stadium, at least.
Why not review that, though? Why not even?
I don't know. You're right. I mean, at the very least, it was close to being a safety, right? Yeah. So I don't know what the crew, and I don't know what the logistics are nowadays. I don't know. For what I know, I think Kirk can take a timeout and request that they look at it. Obviously, that's your way of making time for them to take a look and requesting that they take a look. I think at that point, I think that is an option for him. And maybe if the call is reversed, maybe you can get your timeout back. I'm not sure. Is that NFL or is that college?
I think you get your timeout back in college. You don't get your challenge back, but you get your timeout back.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know the particulars on the challenge, but it was awfully close. It was odd to me that they'd run a play where they'd take the ball that far away from the line of scrimmage and give it to the back on the goal line. I was fully expecting a quarterback sneak on the first down. Of course, there's no guarantee there. We stopped them on a quarterback sneak out on the field. But I think in that particular case, if they would have snuck the ball on first down, they would have probably gained a yard, because I don't think we went as heavy with interior linemen as we might have on that fourth and one later in the other part of the game. I'm not sure if it was before or after that goal line play you're talking about.
Well, Don, do you have anything else that you want to bring up before we head out this evening and get ready for a short prep week against Maryland?
Well, I think we have to, I know it's not easy to be patient, but we have to show some patience with our offensive line. It's a hard job. It's there's one reason you don't see a lot of 4-year starters in the offensive line. There's a lot to learn. And as we talked about already, you got to get bigger, faster, stronger. If you're the average guy, you're not really physically capable of playing very well at a young age. So right now, we're not exactly killing people with our O-line play, but certainly their heads are in the right place. They're working to get better. Just as the strength of our defense, you could argue, is our secondary and our linebacker core and the depth in our defensive line. One of our obvious weaknesses is inexperience in the offensive line. We don't have a lot of seasoned veterans in there, and we're going to have a few growing pains. So what can you do? Well, you can simplify assignments as best you can. And, of course, you can try to avoid putting them in difficult spots. difficult spot as an example, 3rd and long, especially if our tackles have to go against really good outside rushers. I don't know what Maryland might have coming off the edge, but in general, of course, our tackles are going to be challenged, pretty stiff challenge on any game day with edge rushers off any team, because most teams do have good edge rushers. They make it a point of trying to find 2 guys that can do that and do it effectively. And the best thing we can do to avoid all that, we talked about it against Iowa State. One of the smartest things we did against Iowa State, we were struggling to protect on 3rd and long. So part of our solution was throw the ball in for early downs. And we didn't get into as many 3rd and longs at that point. And of course, we weren't running the ball that well on early downs anyway. That's one reason you saw us decide to go up and over early in the game a few times, because we weren't that productive running our base offense.
Yeah.
So let's get a little bit out of, I say extreme times calls for extreme measures sometimes, and kind of extreme to think we might throw the ball downfield 3 or 4 times. But I remember what Coach Fry used to tell us about Lee Corso and Bobby Bowden in particular. We get ready to play Indiana, and he told Bill, he said, "Bill, I know Lee Corso. He's going to throw it deep at least half a dozen times.
Right.
He'll do it against us. He'll do it against everybody." Bobby Bowden was the same way. I think their thought process, if we hit 1 out of 3, it's worth it, because those 2 that they hit, if they throw it deep 6 times, those 2 plays are worth 100 yards. And today they were worth, 92 for us?
Yeah.
So that's a good example.
And I was very impressed with Keegan Johnson, Don. I really was. I mean, he came in there and made 2 really, really big catches.
Yeah, I think he's made a positive name for himself. Next week, obviously, Maryland's thinking, I better respect this. He got on top of Colorado State, so I better not underestimate his speed. I better gauge his speed early in the first half, and I better play a little bit on the conservative side. Maybe he'll beat me with some underneath routes, but I'm not going to let him get on top of me like he did last weekend.
Absolutely.
That's just smart football on the part of Maryland if they do that.
Want to throw a shout out to the kind comments of Doug Phelps. Appreciate you being here for the show this evening. Corn and cattle, same thing. And I love the comment here from Charles Pinster. He reminds us that Don Patterson is the GOAT. So
Charles, you're very kind, and next time you're in Iowa City, I'm pretty sure I must owe you lunch.
There you go. And I appreciate the compliment from Ray as well. And Yakov22 reminds us Ohio State is still Ohio State. They're up 35-7 now on Akron. So I would think it's safe to say that game is a wrap. Don, let's make this show a wrap. I appreciate the time as always. Hopefully our listeners did as well. I think they did. I always do. I always love listening to your insight. And again, next week's a short prep week, Don, and it's against a very explosive offense in Maryland. The battle of 2 undefeated teams next Friday, 7:00 on FS1. So, Don, I know you got some work to do giving Kirk some analytics this week, so we appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
No problem. Just a couple of things I want to mention. The kick is 7:00 Central, right? Correct. I have to do a game for the Missouri Valley. I do a game for the Missouri Valley on Saturday in South Dakota. So I'm planning on getting it. We're going to spend the night in Omaha and then go on up to South Dakota the next morning. So I do plan to get in Omaha in time to watch the kickoff. And so I will be available, I think. I don't know how it'll work. Maybe I'll have to find out what the hotel might have in the way of equipment. If all else fails, I guess we might try the infamous smartphone, I guess, as last resort. But let me say one other thing, Corey, and I think this is the right kind of request to make. I really do appreciate the response that we're getting from our listeners. And the only thing I'd like to ask them to do in return is spread the word and let your friends know you think it's worthwhile to listen to. We'd be honored to have you on our show, and we appreciate that people care so much about Iowa football.
Absolutely. And certainly Mark Rogers at the Voice of College Football has helped to make all this possible, and so many different post games across the landscape of college football. So check out the Voice of College Football on YouTube. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed here to Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football or Iowa at the Voice of College Football, do that. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, coverage from myself from the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts throughout the week. And again, each and every week, Don Patterson's here to talk about Hawkeye football. Don, enjoy 4-0. and we'll get a short prep week and a big game coming up next week against Maryland.
Yes, it is.
All right, for Don Patterson, I'm Corey Bratta, and this has been Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. We'll talk to you soon.